Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has announced a move by the Colombian government to reopen shared borders as an attempt to trigger a COVID-19 outbreak in Venezuela. The World Health Organization has opened its annual assembly with a draft resolution that acknowledges mistakes in the response to COVID-19. Israeli police have launched an operation of mass arrests of Palestinian citizens following 2 weeks of protests against Israeli settlement policies in occupied East Jerusalem and the bombardment of the Gaza Strip. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro commented on the Colombian government's attempts to reopen its borders with Venezuela, denouncing the move as an effort by the Ivan Duque administration to trigger a wider COVID-19 outbreak in Venezuela.
Now we have the threat of the Indian, South African and Californian variant currently present in Cucuta. They are talking about opening the border unilaterally from Colombia. I say nothing unilateral is going to work. If the obstinate, reactionary government of Colombia does not coordinate with the Bolivarian and legitimate government of Venezuela, nothing at the border is going to work. They only want to use the opening of the border to disturb the border and to send us those more dangerous variants to contaminate Táchira and all of Venezuela. I denounce this.
In this context, the Venezuelan president ordered the development of a special plan to protect the country's borders with Colombia in view of the threat of the coronavirus variants found in the Colombian border city of Cucuta.
So I have told the Vice President and the Minister of Interior, Justice and Peace, draft me a plan to protect the Venezuelan border, especially the Táchira border, from the Colombian government's plan to send the most dangerous variants of the coronavirus to Venezuela.
The police repression of protesters in Colombia continued over the weekend, with further incidents reported in the city of Cali, an epicenter of the anti-government mobilizations. The violence intensified on Sunday night in the midst of cultural and protest activities scheduled in different areas of the city. Among the events, demonstrators participated in a massive pot-banging protest in tribute to the young people murdered at the hands of the security forces since the beginning of the national strike mobilizations. At the same time, social movements denounced the multiple cases of forced disappearances registered since the beginning of the protests, as well as the recent appearance of bodies of demonstrators with evident signs of torture. And Sunday night also saw fierce repression by state security forces in the Colombian city of Cajamarca. Social movements and human rights defenders denounced that agents of the notorious anti-riot squadron and the military repressed local protesters. Several were injured by the impact of ammunition and tear gas canisters. Among them, a 34-year-old was hit in the head, another suffered a serious eye injury, and a man hit at a police station was admitted to hospital with convulsions. Among those who suffered the police attacks were 2 women and 3 children. And this Monday, the Colombian Senate begins debates on a motion of censure against Defense Minister Diego Molano for human rights violations by the security forces during the national strike mobilizations of the past weeks. The minister is accused of being responsible for the police violence unleashed against peaceful demonstrators after several weeks of human rights abuses committed by security forces, ranging from assassinations with the use of live ammunition, forced disappearances, sexual violence and injuries inflicted across several cities of the country. To date, at least 43 people have been killed by the security forces during the protests. And staying in Colombia, the National Strike Committee has called for sit-ins to be held throughout the country despite the violent crackdown by state security forces. The committee announced nationwide sit-ins starting this Monday and running through Tuesday against the neoliberal policies of the government headed by President Ivan Duque and in support of the motions of censure to be debated by the Senate against the defense minister. Demonstrations in the country's regional capitals are also scheduled for Wednesday in order to mobilize people across the different municipalities of each department to call for negotiations with the government. And Colombian human rights organizations have revealed several locations that are believed to have been used by agents of the mobile anti-riot squadron to detain, torture and force the disappearance of protesters in the city of Cali. The organizations denounced that Cali's Municipal Administrative Center was used by the police as a secret operations center. According to the information, since May 13th, the police have been detaining demonstrators in the facility's basements, where they have been tortured and even killed, with their bodies taken out in vans hours later. A report notes that the bodies were transported to Molalo municipality to be dumped in a mass grave. The organizations also received complaints about the existence of mass graves in rural areas of the municipalities of Buga and Yumbo. The organizations urged the government, the Institute of Forensic Medicine and the Missing Persons Search Unit to initiate an investigation into the events immediately, recalling that at least 150 people have disappeared in the city since April 28th. Guillermo Lasso took office as president of Ecuador this Monday after being elected on April 11th. The inauguration ceremony took place in the National Assembly. Lasso replaces Lenin Moreno as president, who was heavily criticized during his term in office for the neoliberal measures implemented, including a return to huge debt with the IMF and the violent repression of protests against his government by the security forces. 90% of the population condemned his handling of the COVID-19 epidemic. Lasso is expected to follow a similar policy. Only a few presidents attended the ceremony. In the United States, supporters and relatives of African-American George Floyd marched ahead of the first anniversary of his murder by a white policeman, a killing that prompted widespread protests against systemic racism and police violence. Tuesday will mark a year since George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis, a year since video of then police officer Derek Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck went viral and ignited a week of unrest in the city and a nationwide examination of the many issues surrounding racism and law enforcement in the United States. Civil rights leaders and members of Floyd's family marked the anniversary with a rally and march in the city to protest against racism and police brutality. Chauvin was convicted of 3 counts of murder and manslaughter and is to be sentenced on June 25th. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The World Health Organization has opened its annual assembly with a draft resolution that acknowledges mistakes in the response to COVID-19. The resolution, promoted by the European Union and Vanuatu, would seek to boost the pandemic response, stabilise the WHO's funding and ensure greater access to healthcare, including to vaccines, tests and treatments linked to the coronavirus. During his speech, WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus regretted that more than 100,000 health and care workers have died from COVID-19 globally, and many more will die as the pandemic continues to rage. Representatives of the 194 member states of the organisation are participating in the assembly, being held through video conference.
Globally, we remain
And in the framework of the World Health Assembly, the Director General of the WHO warned that no country should assume it is safe in the face of COVID-19 as the global situation remains fragile.
As of today, more cases have been reported so far this year than in the whole of 2020. On current trends, the number of deaths will overtake last year's total within the next 3 weeks. Since our health assembly started this morning, almost 1,000 people have lost their lives to COVID-19. And in the time it takes me to make these remarks, a further 400 will die. This is very tragic. Goal means we must vaccinate 250 million more people in low and middle income countries in just 4 months, including all health workers and the most at-risk groups as the first priority. These are the minimum targets we should aim for.
On Monday, India surpassed 300,000 confirmed coronavirus deaths, despite the fall in the number of new cases. India thus became the third country after the United States and Brazil to cross the fatal figure. For several weeks, the nation of 1.3 billion has been recording daily rises in infections and fatalities that have overwhelmed its healthcare system. While the crisis has eased in major cities such as New Delhi and Mumbai, the coronavirus is still spreading in rural areas and southern states. According to government figures, in the last 24 hours, India recorded more than 4,000 COVID-19 related deaths, the second highest daily figure to date. The harsh second wave has been accompanied by the emergence of the usually rare infection known as black fungus, with experts warning that the excessive use of steroids on COVID-19 patients is causing this surge.
Looking at the current situation, I think it's going to take time, because you see the population is quite huge in India. That's why it's taking time. And I think lockdown will extend 1 or 2 weeks, and they will remove the restrictions slowly so that we can control the situation.
Remedies to control the virus, and we hope that we are going to win the battle by this one of the methods of controlling the virus. And I think another 10-15 days more and India will be back on the normal.
And staying in India, exactly a week after the devastating cyclone Tauktae hit, a total of 86 bodies have been recovered from the Arabian Sea, including 70 from the 2 vessels that sank near Mumbai high fields. The total number of deaths linked to the cyclone, which devastated several cities in the country, has now reached 145. Meanwhile, a total of 188 survivors were picked up at sea during the massive Navy search and rescue operations, which lasted 7 days, the first half of which were conducted in extreme weather conditions. The cyclone forced the authorities to suspend the vaccination campaign in the affected areas. Hundreds of protesters partially blocked a highway into Nigeria's capital, Abuja, on Monday after residents reported a spate of kidnappings in the area. Police said 6 people were abducted in Goraka by unknown gunmen on Monday morning, and that police were intensifying efforts to rescue the victims. Africa's most populous country has been plagued by kidnappings for years, with criminals largely targeting the wealthy and prominent. But more recently, the pool of victims has expanded, and the vulnerable and poor across the country are now also taken for ransom. Local media also reported that 12 people were kidnapped in nearby Madala town and 2 others in Bawari just last week.
And anytime they come, the security always come 30 minutes after they have left. So you people need to do something, because it's getting too much.
In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, at least 20 people were killed, many are missing, and thousands forced to flee after a volcano eruption near the eastern city of Goma. While hundreds of homes were buried, the city of Goma, home to some 2 million people, was spared when the lava downfall from Mount Nyiragongo stopped short of reaching the urban area. The initial number of victims is likely to grow as families are reporting missing relatives. Thousands fled on foot into neighbouring Rwanda. In 2002, an eruption left 250 people dead and 120,000 homeless. The Minister of Health promised quick solutions, but victims are not so sure.
In support of the provincial authorities to give and find solutions. The reason we came here on the ground to observe the state of the situation, it's a shame, catastrophic, but the will is certain. We will find a solution very quickly.
I can't go alone. We've been married for the best and for the worst. I went back to at least try to get him out, but couldn't. I ran away and he got burned inside. I don't know what to do. I curse this day.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Monday, Israeli police launched an operation of mass arrests of Palestinian citizens following 2 weeks of protests against Israeli settlement policies in occupied East Jerusalem and the bombardment of the Gaza Strip. A plan approved by the Minister of Internal Security and the Commissioner of Israeli Police includes the arrest of 500 Palestinians under Operation Law and Order. Over 1,500 people have already been arrested since May 9th. The 48-hour arrest campaign is allegedly aimed at targeting criminal elements. Israel has mobilized thousands of police officers from all districts and units, including the border police, to carry out the arrests. The director of the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel, Hassan Jabarin, criticized the arrest campaign as a war against Palestinian demonstrators, political activists, and even minors. And Palestinian Health Minister Maal Al-Kaila stated that the Israeli attacks on the Palestinian people in Jerusalem, the occupied West Bank and the Gaza Strip in recent weeks killed 277 citizens, including 70 children and 40 women, in addition to more than 800 wounded. During a press conference, the minister reported 89 violations against health treatment centres and ambulance vehicles, which he stressed constitute a gross violation of all international conventions and treaties. British police are struggling to end a protest at an Israeli weapons factory in Leicester, England. Activists have occupied the drone manufacturing facility's roof since May 19th. Members of Palestine Action, made up of groups and activists that are taking direct action to end complicity with Israeli apartheid, climbed up on the roof of the facility belonging to UAV Tactical Systems, a subsidiary of Israeli weapons manufacturers Elbit Systems and French firm Thales UK, and also barricaded gates to the site to prevent any more British-made drones being sent to commit atrocities in Gaza. Police have been working with private security personnel to end the direct action, as hundreds of people came out in support of the occupation of Elbit's Leicester facility on May 20th, when 2 supporters were reportedly arrested for aiding and abetting aggravated trespass after they gave food and water to Palestine Action members on the roof. Local firefighters were also called to the scene but refused to move against the protesters, with the Leicester Fire Brigades Union issuing a statement in solidarity with the activists. On Monday, the Taliban launched attacks in a district of eastern Afghanistan where local elders had negotiated a 1-month ceasefire, dashing hopes of a temporary truce. The ceasefire began last Tuesday to allow locals to harvest wheat and students to sit exams. Clashes have escalated in Afghanistan as the United States and NATO forces gradually withdraw troops. Neighbouring countries have tried to pressure the Taliban to reduce violence, negotiate a peace settlement and announce a ceasefire. But progress has been slow and violence has increased as other extremist groups also operate in the country. A local security officer reported that the attacks targeted Afghan security forces' checkpoints. Analysts note that the Taliban is increasing pressure in the east and south of the country, where it has a heavy presence, as foreign forces are set to withdraw from the region. The government of Belarus described as unfounded the accusations of several Western countries regarding the diversion of a Ryanair passenger plane to Minsk after receiving a bomb warning. Belarusian Foreign Minister Vladimir Makey stressed that the response of Western politicians to the situation is a planned provocation. Meanwhile, ministry spokesman Anatoly Glas stated that the procedure was carried out in full compliance with the established international norms, following a distress signal sent by the aircraft. He also accused Western countries of making unfounded accusations about the incident for political reasons. In this regard, the government of Belarus invited all interested parties to participate in the investigation into the bomb warning that diverted the plane flying from Athens to Vilnius. In Myanmar, at least 4 people are reported dead and 8 wounded after an army attack on a Christian church. The event occurred in the state of Cayenne in the early hours of Sunday when several people were sheltered in the religious building. According to local sources, army forces fired several projectiles and explosives that injured women and children, as well as alleged rebels. The wounded were taken to nearby health centres. Several states of the country are under intense fire due to the conflict that started when the military took power in February. Confusion now reigns in the African nation of Mali, where the military put the interim president, prime minister and defence minister under arrest. All 3 officials were taken to a military base in Kati, outside the capital Bamako, sources told foreign journalists. The move followed a cabinet reshuffle on Monday, in which 2 key army officers, the defence and security ministers, had lost their positions in favour of civilians. In August 2020, a military coup put an interim government in place, promising a gradual return to civilian rule and elections in February 2022. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us for all the latest news on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram, and you can catch up on our shows on our YouTube channel. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.